Tai sveiki visi, toliau tęsiam neredaguotą pokalbius ir jau kuris laikas neturėjom mūsų bičiulio iš Ukrainos, kalbu apie Victorą Tregubov ir šiandien mes jį turim, aišku, aptarsim visą tai, kas vyksta. Epizodą pavadinom Rusijos agresija, kas toliau. Tai tiesiog noriu priminti, kad visi mūsų angliakalbiai epizodai yra kanale Let's Talk Europe, tai kas dar neužsiprenumeravot, užsiprenumeruokit. O dabar mes sveikiname su Victoru. So, hello, Victor. I was introducing you as our friend of the show who wasn't on the show for a few months. So,
not too actually, maybe 1 month or so, but thanks.
Yeah, so hopefully, those 2 months weren't so bad for you, but you'll tell us. I called this episode Russian Aggression, What's Next? Obviously, there is lots of development. What do you think is the most important right now from your perspective as an Ukrainian, as a politician? We see that today Russian Parliament Duma has approved the special power for the government, for the military operation, which is some analysts call it sort of hidden mobilization. What do you guys in Ukraine see as a most potentially, aggressive towards you, most potentially serious? How do you see it?
Okay, first things first. Russians have some kind of program minimum. They want to take at least all of Donbass. Well, said for us, they more or less succeed with Luhansk Oblast. Now, after taking Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, almost all Luhansk Oblast is now Russian control. That's bad, but they still need to control Donetsk Oblast in order to complete their first objective, and it means actually controlling other twin agglomeration of Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. That's corner cities for them because that was the place all that started. You remember maybe that all the invasion on Donbass began in Slovyansk and Kramatorsk.
But Victor, we heard yesterday, I think, from Patrushev that regime change and territorial expansion beyond Donbass is their goal. So could you expand on this as well? Because I'm not sure that many analysts and journalists and politicians believe that this is going to stop by the border of the mentioned regions.
It's like in that joke about my neighbor is telling that he is sexually active after his 90 years. Well, you can also tell. so Patrushev can tell anything, but practically for now, their main goal is that agglomeration of Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. That absolutely precise, because we just see this preparation, we see their next goal, and they'll do anything to take it. We have one strategic problem. Our strategic problem is that Russians have a really great amount of old Soviet artillery and rather new and cheap Russian drones to operate this artillery to mark the targets. That's a problem. That's a problem because we cannot solve that with NATO weaponry. We can only limit it with NATO weaponry. Why? Because NATO never planned actually to make an artillery war with Russia. NATO always had a great advantage in aviation, in planes. So theoretically, any Russian artillery should be destroyed by NATO planes in case of Russian aggression against NATO. NATO have no such amounts of artillery. Of course, NATO artillery is better. It's more long range, it's more precise, and so on. But numbers, quantity, actually sometimes matters. And NATO just cannot provide Ukraine with such a quantity of artillery just because NATO have no such quantity of artillery.
Some analysts say that the only country could supply is the United States, because obviously in Europe, in France, I'm not even talking about Germany, and even in UK, as you said, it's very limited. But in US, they do have plenty of it.
Yes, but the logistical problem with supplying from United States, actually moving half of the known world, it's a bit problematic here. So yeah, they theoretically can, but it's problematic. And they, of course, NATO cannot give Ukraine its aviation to create an aviation superiority, just because it's much more difficult than give artillery, because you should train pilots, you should have pilots, you should actually make all the necessary preparation to supply this aviation with I forgot the proper name, with details and so on and so on.
But to be honest, I saw on Twitter, I'm just trying to find, it was like a few days ago, that the first batch of Ukrainian pilots, there was a picture, in DC, I guess, if I remember correctly, starting training, on the Western aircrafts. Is there any detail on this?
F-16, I believe. Yes, our guys are trying to do that, but that will be a limited supply, first of all, because planes are really expensive. That's the most expensive type of actually military equipment. And secondary, because it's hard to maintain them. It's not only complicated to maintain them, but it's actually costly. And you should have not only pilots, but technicians, details for them, ammunition for them, and that's you should have the whole infrastructure. It's much easier with artillery, it's much easier with tanks, but with planes, that's a bit complicated thing, so that could cause a problem. But still, of course, our guys try to take everything they can, to use everything they can, and to break some kind this Russian combination of artillery and drones, because without that, Russian just will slowly, really slowly, but surely advance on Ukrainian territory, creating a constant wall of constant artillery fire that will just destroy every city on its path. Of course, Russia will conquer only barren land with some smoke and ruins on that land. But I suppose, judging from the examples of Popasna, Mariupol, Lysychansk, and so on, they are actually ready to do that. They actually are fine with that, just with taking just a full squares of land. That's a problem, yeah. So we should just find something to solve the problem. We have one kind of palliative. When we got HIMARS rockets, HIMARS missiles, we begin to attack their depots, ammunition depots, their supply lines, and so on. And that was effective and beautiful. But still, that caused their advance maybe to become a bit slower, but not to stop entirely. That's more of a palliative than a panacea, so we still have some problems.
Yeah, I see that some experts say that right now, there is a peak of Russian military might. Have you heard anything like in Ukrainian media in terms of Ministry of Defense and talking about this? How do you see it? Because maybe it's just smoke wall or some kind of talking point for the Western media.
Well, let's say they took all the Soviet weaponry they got actually ready and prepared to fight, and that's just a huge amount of different military equipments. Of course, it's outdated. It breaks and so on, but still, it's just too big quantity to handle. That's a main problem. Of course, they still suck in close combat. That's true, because when it comes to close combat, well, they have worse infantry, less educated, less complicated, less experienced infantry, and with much lower level of moral spirit and so on. That's a problem for them, but they still try to solve everything they have with artillery, because we, in every other aspect, except maybe aviation, we can beat them. We already even liberated Snake Island, that's cool. because they really tried to hold as long as they possibly could on this island, but we just swept them from it. That's great from my perspective.
But was it due to the new HIMARS artillery, rocket artillery, or was it Neptunes, or was it a combination? What was some even say that they understood the stupidity of holding the island. So in your opinion, what was the case for this?
This island was really important for them because it allowed them to control the western part of Black Sea. First of all, air over the Black Sea, because after cruiser Moscow was sunk, cruiser Moscow was specialized in anti-aircraft defense, and they lost all the anti-aircraft defense over Black Sea, meaning that actually Ukrainian drones, Bayraktars, and Ukrainian missiles and rockets could hit any target in this region. So that was problematic for them because they had plans for Western Black Sea, like trying to make some kind of incursion to Odessa, like trying to blockade Ukrainian trade and so on, so on. But when we destroyed their anti-aircraft guns and their anti-aircraft support vehicles on Zminy, they just understood that it's impossible. As far as I know, it was used not only both Ukrainian and Western artillery, like Ukrainian Dana and Western HIMARS. Yeah, so that was some kind of combined strike. Not Neptune, because Neptune is anti-ship missile, and that was about hitting the island, not hitting the ships, but yes.
I see. So, since you started talking about the Black Sea, what is the situation with the Black Sea? We constantly hear that, that some Russian, submarines are ready, and, their fleet is already on the way and stuff like that. So actually, how much threat does, Ukrainian territory receive from the sea? Those strikes on Odessa, do they come from the sea, or they come from, Crimea? What is the situation with the Black Sea?
On the Black Sea, Russia used its missile frigates to bombard Ukrainian territories. That's the main problem Black Sea causing for now. No kind of incursion from the sea for now is possible, just because Ukrainians are now well equipped with anti-ship and all other types of missiles, so Russians cannot just try to make a sea landing near Odessa or near Mykolaiv or so on. That's not a problem for now, so the only problem is Russian missile frigates. But still, theoretically, Russian missile frigates can shoot even from Caspian Sea, theoretically, and some of them actually do. So that's not a problem with Black Sea, it's more like a problem with Russian long-range missiles.
Oh, well, maybe it's a stupid question, but why doesn't, the success of Moscow is being repeated, since now, there are advanced anti-ship missiles from the Netherlands and I'm not sure, maybe somewhere else. Why don't we see some more, beautiful videos of sinking Russian military ships?
It's really easy. They just don't operate in that zone.
So they don't come too close, yeah?
Yeah, they just retreated from the western part of Black Sea. They don't operate in in range of Ukrainian missiles. So that's all.
So, and what about the ports? We heard a few days ago that Turkey has kind of blocked a ship, on their territory, a Russian ship with probably stolen grain. What is the situation, with the export talks with the partners? Has this idea of, some kind of military escort for the Ukrainian grain? What is the development here?
Truth to be told, I don't know. As far as I know, the last problem with that was that Russia actually mined a big part of Western Black Sea, and we need just to remove the mines for now. But as long as Russia retreated from the region, theoretically we can try to move our ships even now. Well, after we clean the mines from the region. I don't suppose that Russia will try to hit civilian vessels from the eastern Black Sea, but that's Russian. I don't know. It's everything is possible when you're Russian enough, but I hope not. I hope not. Still, that's not really my topic, and I don't really know. Is there for now any talks about specific securing Ukrainian sea roads with third parties or no? I hope so, because that's important. I hope so because we need to resume this export, not even because of Ukrainian economy, but because of food shortages in Africa that could cause actually a number of refugees to European country and create turmoil in Europe, which we are actually desperately trying to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, European leaders also understand this, and we see that this topic is constantly on the agenda. So, like, talking about the front, of course, most of our viewers are watching, constantly every evening a front update from a dude which you have a specific opinion about, but let's leave this for later. But the front line from Kharkiv to Kherson, in your opinion, like I'm not an expert at all, but I see that from the information that is floating, that probably, this, as you said, the front is approaching, deeper and deeper into Ukrainian territory, in this Donbas, Luhansk region, but Kherson is on the brink of liberation. Maybe we are just too enthusiastic. How do you see it?
Well, Russians try desperately to hold Kherson and Zaporizhzhia Oblast, but for now they have some problems there, and they try to reinforce it with new troops. Well, maybe they will succeed, maybe don't. I suppose sooner or later they still will have to, go from a western bank of Dnipro, which include Kherson actually, but with the eastern territories it could be a bit more complicated. Still, I hope that after we will get all actual weapons we need, we could create some kind of counteroffensive.
So does that mean that you have to wait for the Lend-Lease, or you're talking about the weapons from European countries? How does it look from your side?
From my side, it's more like Lend-Lease, because for now, we first of all we have to stop Russians and to destroy as many their material and personal as we can before we launch a counteroffensive. But to launch this counteroffensive, we need to create some kind of advantage in numerical terms, not only in terms of quality. And to create that, we actually need that Lend-Lease. And we hope for them. Of course, it could be a number of problems starting from the elections in the United States, but that's our best bet for now.
You probably saw that Russian media is already raising questions like, should they install a new president in USA or should they not? And they are talking about the previous president of United States. It's of course total crap, but. Yeah, the election might change something. So you think that the Republican majority would change their attitude towards Ukraine?
Well, it's possible, because for now they're using this card in their internal discussions, in their quarrel with Democrats. And it's not like you must help Ukraine bigger. It's more like you should just avoid this situation, blah, 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 blah. That's a problem. That's a problem because a number of Republican speakers, that's painful for me, but a number of Republican speakers used this not pro-Russian, but I'd say Islanistic rhetoric. And that's a problem, yeah.
Absolutely. So another hot topic is always one of our neighbors, we have that neighbor and you have that neighbor. I'm talking about Belarus, you know, and Lukashenko, and he is maneuvering, he is doing, you know, all sorts of stuff, mobilization and meeting with Putin and whatever, but still he hasn't, well, at least officially, you know, joined this war and, you know, the different name of this thing that they call it, but we will not use it for the purposes of not, you know, spreading the propaganda of, you know, strange naming. So how do you see the Lukashenko and his role in the upcoming months?
Well, every family has an uncle you're embarrassed with. Of course, for us, some of our experts are afraid of Russian attacks from Belarusian side and from Belarus to join. But from my perspective, technically, if Belarus and Lukashenko wanted to join, they should have did it.
There was a better time to do it. Obviously, was a better time to do it.
Absolutely, definitely. And to attack on Kyiv is impossible for the whole Belarusian army. They just have no ability to do so. Russian tried with much more force, and it was disaster for them. Theoretically, they can try to attack Volyn. They can try to attack Western Ukrainian Oblast and to cut the line of supplies between East and West. But well, it's really risky for them. And from our perspective, first of all, the level of well, experience, technical, blah 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 of Belarusian army.
They have never fought any kind of war, you know, any kind of conflict. They didn't, you know, engage in. So, what kind of experience is there, you know?
Yeah, actually, and the second thing is that well. We don't suppose they now can, because if they will try to prepare, we'll see. Because this kind of preparation you cannot hide. You need to create a medical, you need to create a specific units for attack. You need to create field hospitals. You need to create infrastructure for the attack to supply your troops. And we are talking not about steppes of southern Ukraine, but actually about swamps of northern Ukraine. That's problematic at all. So I don't think that if they will try to do something like that, it could be a surprise for us. No, it's impossible. It's actually will be seen both from our intelligence, US intelligence, and Lithuanian intelligence, actually. So we'll all know.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a big surprise for them, you know, as we understand and see, you know, their readiness and the equipment they have, which is, well, of course, it's always good not to underestimate, you know, an enemy, but let's be honest, as you mentioned, the uncle is shameful. So the other hot topic I wanted to talk to you about is internal, Ukrainian internal thing that was probably came out yesterday to the media or day before. Yesterday, I'm talking, today is July 6th, is the issue, I would say, with the conscripts and their travel permits, and you know, the president has asked Commander-in-Chief and Minister of Defense not to do similar moves in the future. So what is happening there? You probably have much more detailed information and view since you in Ukraine.
Well, that's idiotic. That's a fuss about nothing, actually, because this norm about you can't leave your oblast without notifying your conscript station, or voinkomat in Russian, or vizkomat in Ukrainian. I don't know the proper English word. Well, recruiting station. You should inform your local officer. But the thing is, this norm is actually in Ukrainian laws from the year 1992. So
yeah, we heard that, but why then it was, you know, emphasized, and you know, this big issue was made out of it, since it's an old norm, and most of, you know, people should know it. And Ukraine is at war not the first day and not the first year.
I suppose that was a problem with communicator in Office of Ministry of Defense or the Office of General Staff. I can't remember for now. Yeah, General Staff. Just because, well, this is norm that every military person actually knows. Because for me, it's literally written in my officer, not badge, but officer passport. That's every of us know, but for civil people it sounded like some kind of news that will be just introduced, and they was like, oh, so we cannot do that. But well, you lived all your life without that, because this norm actually was never implemented, and I don't suppose it actually was planned to be implemented, but that was some kind of example of bad communication.
Well, there is an opinion or a version which says that this is sort of some kind of political, fight between the political groups in Ukraine. Is there any grain of truth in it?
Well, I don't believe that. From perspective of my friends, it was some kind of rivalry between Office of President and General Staff. And like the Office of President makes some kind of provocation against General Staff, I'm not really a fan of Office of President of Ukraine, but I should say that from my experience, this type of miscommunications are prone to be results of idiocy, not results of some kind of cunning plan. Well, it's theoretical, it could be cunning plan, but in most cases, from my experience, and I have plenty of experience in Ukrainian communication, including state ones, it's mostly idiocy in 90%.
Well, that's probably a better version, than the one that is floating in some media, places. So, how is the general mood in Ukraine? Because obviously, as you mentioned, the Ukraine is waiting for the land lease, and the Europeans are also doing everything not in the highest gear, let's say it like that. What is the mood like in terms of because we hear that the Russian army is demoralized, the stuff like that. Obviously, there should be some psychological weight on the Ukrainian side as well. How do you see from your as I understand, and most of our listeners know, in the territorial defense, so you probably see it firsthand. What is the situation?
I'm not in territorial defense. I'm in just an army.
Yeah, so just an army. Okay.
Okay. So the situation is like there is psychological phenomena that the more is distance between you and actual fight, the more you're nervous. That's that's a phenomenon, because if you are a soldier on the front line, you're not so nervous about some kind of military advance or maybe retreat, like the person sitting in Lviv, because the person sitting in Lviv watching this fight like I don't know, like a world final of the World Cup, football World Cup is like, and when you're on the field, when you're a player, it's not so tragic for you. It could seems not intuitive, but that's true. So for soldiers, everything is more or less normal. So soldiers are angry because many of their friends are wounded, but that's don't demoralize them. They just make us want to kill more Russians. That's actually not always bad. And but with civilians, yes, civilians are nervous about some retreats, about leaving Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and that was some kind of trauer and so on. But from other perspective, we liberated Snake Island. It's also good psychological, made a good psychological effect on our population, and that was like bad there, but good there. No problem. Actually, I must admit that people get used to words that no person is actually ready for constant stress. You cannot be in constant stress, so you just your mind don't work this way. So persons in Ukraine, people in Ukraine are just combining this like our war with our well, I suppose. Everyday things like fourth season of Stranger Things coming on Netflix and so on, so on, so on.
So I want to ask you, because like there are different opinions, of course, and there are people who are stressing, as you said, that, you know, the army, Ukrainian army had to retreat from those two cities that were, you know, lost or, you know, not lost, but the retreat was an option that was chosen. How does the military show, because you know, see this? Because we hear that it's better to save an army and to give territory, because without an army you cannot regain territory. But you know, the old Soviet heroism, you know, way of fighting, they will, you know, it's considered, you know, to fighting till the last drop. So how is the media and, you know, the population perceiving this in general? Is it explained properly that, you know, we are doing a tactical maneuver, or you know, everybody's talking everything and there is a mess of information?
Like I told, it depends from the sector of audience. Like maybe housewives or just old ladies is like, oh, we lost something. But the people is who actually more in the theme of warfare is like, okay, it was maybe a right tactical decision for now, because we really need to save an army, to save personnel, to save equipment for us to strike back. From our perspective, we cannot win this war by standing to the last one, because actually the last one will become rather soon. We need to maneuver, yes, and sometimes we need to retreat, but we need to retreat causing maximal damage to Russian forces. We need to cut them and make them bleed, and we need to make them bleed, so when we will counter-offense, they will be already depleted in weapons and most important things in qualified personnel. That's our goal, that's our tactic now, and many people understand that. But understanding of this fact depends from your understanding, how the war is going at all, and understanding something about military. Not every person in Ukraine understands something about military. However, the numbers are rising and rising and rising.
Well, it's obvious, probably, you know, since you are at war for so long. I mean, I'm not talking about this 133 days, if I correctly count the number, but those 8 years, you know.
Years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
actually.
Yeah. So I always ask you this, and I'm going to ask you again. How do you see the recent and, you know, the Western actions, you know, supplies, political moves? How is, you know, Ukrainian media, politicians, and the population see, you know, the support from European Union, from, you know, UK, from US? What I'm trying to ask, maybe there is some kind of, you know, blaming mood already on that, you know, you don't get everything that's needed on time. How is the vibe here?
Well, we in Ukraine, as well as you in Lithuania, sometimes are eager to blame someone to find the worst possible way of thinking, and so on, so on. That's our common problem from my experience. But so yes, many people try to find someone to blame, and many people blame actually Western allies for the quantity of their help. That it could be better, it could be faster. And yes, I believe that if we had HIMARSs a month earlier, maybe we could hold Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, actually, theoretically. Well, we at least could try. But well, this that as a cards we have for now. This is actually how we should play. Of course, yeah, help from Western side could be bigger, but I can say that during Georgian war, help from Ukrainian side also could be bigger. It was not really small, but it could be bigger. We could start our own war and open the second front to save Georgia, but we didn't. So why we hope that third country will help us much more than we was sometimes ready to help our closest friends? That's sadly, but that's how politics work. We should try to do everything to prove for Germans, for French people, and so on, that they should help us, that it's their best interest, not our, but their best interest. But if we want to do it in time, that's basically our problem.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to ask you is obviously, I'm not sure how much you can comment on this, but hopefully you can do at least a bit. We are going to do an episode quite soon with one of our ex intel person who has a very negative opinion about this influencer that I was mentioning before, and I wanted to ask your opinion. Like it's actually a very popular house name. I'm talking about Aleksejų Arestovičių. How do you, as an Ukrainian, also as a person from the military, as you said, because the other one is also considers himself part of this family. How do you see it, and what's the biggest issues? Because people who have dug into the internet, into the older posts of this person, they found some strange, pro-Russian sentiment and stuff like that. And obviously, people change. But in your opinion, what is the role and the idea behind this whole phenomena, that is actually in the region? Everybody who understands at least, some level of Russian, they listen at least, a few times a week and for this update. So what is your opinion?
Well, let me be a bit diplomatic here.
From my perspective, okay.
He could theoretically be a great communicator, but he has his obvious problems because for a communicator of Ukrainian policies, he is much too personal, much too narcissistic, and much too an actor, I'd say.
But what do you mean when you say much too personal? He doesn't usually, mention names, surnames, and and expand, usually, well, sometimes he curses, in Russian, show signs, but usually it's when they are talking about some lack of, supplies or, contributions from Germany or France or whatever,
Well, let me put it that way. If you're a communicator of a state, like imagine that you're a speaker of, I don't know, United States Department of Defense or United States State Secretary and so on, so on. You're a speaker. So when you're a speaker, you need to be to talk not about yourself and not your personal position, but position of your country, position of your department, and so on, so on, so on. And you shouldn't, make quarrels with bloggers. You shouldn't say things like "fuck off, you idiot," blah 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 blah. Alexei sadly too like his own voice to stop doing that for the moment he is the official speaker.
But usually, but those talks that they are giving at 10 p.m. every evening or most of the evenings, it's not like his official statements, as his job. It's like it's his spare time. Let's put it like that.
Yes, but he communicates from like a person that represents position of office of president in position of Ukraine. If he just talked like a political expert or like some kind of journalist, publicist, I don't know, it could be absolutely perfect. That's the thing I communicate myself when I communicate from my own name. But if I communicate from the name or if my audience understand it like I communicate from the name of general staff or office of president or so on, I cannot be such a person. I should be more like a mirror of my own department, mirror of my own, I don't know, structure. And he cannot be a mirror. He wants to be Aleksejų Arestovičių. Still, I'm not some kind of official speaker. It could be effective if we had other speakers, more people that talk about Ukraine and talk more than Mr. Arestovičių. But sadly, he perceived as a speaker from Ukrainian name, and well, for this, he is too personal. Still, he is competent in his own way. Well, I know a number of my friends want to at least break some bones in his body because of some of his personal attitudes. I am not from that list. I have no personal problems with him, but if you want me to evaluate his position as an expert and as a commentator, well, that's my perspective.
So when you mean, there are some people who are offended, is that, mostly from the military sphere, that's offended because I have heard from some Lithuanian, ex-military people who say that, and, some statements, should, make very, angry the military, or are your friends from other sectors?
From really different sectors, actually, from military, from politicians, and so on. But from my perspective, the most important critics comes from military, yes, because yes, of course, there are critics of Arestovičių from political spectrum, but in Ukraine politics, every person criticizes everyone except himself. That's normal. That's nothing to worry about. But when you are criticized by some people who with military background and with good arguments to criticize you, that's much more a problem. That's not about politics. That's about your qualification. And sometimes their critics actually has its own ground and point.
Since you mentioned the politics, what kind of political spectrum does he represent or sympathizes? Because I have had a chat with a few Ukrainians who consider themselves. You included, liberal politicians. So is he too conservative for the liberals, or as you said, it's some personal traits that get people offended?
He just works for office of president and servant of the People Party. Practically, yes. That's really, really funny because a few years ago, he was really pro-Poroshenko and anti-Zelensky. Even in the first years of Zelensky reign, he was absolutely anti-Zelensky, and he has no problem to call every follower of Zelensky idiots, call Zelensky himself an idiot and a clown and so on and so on. But then, office of president finds some keys to his heart, and the change was so rapid and so drastic. It's even a bit satirical.
So is it the only change in his career? Because as I mentioned, some older, digging into older posts on internet, looks like there are some pro-Russian sentiment. Yes. Is that true, or that's some kind of fake news?
It wasn't a fake news. He really worked even with Dugin. You maybe know who Dugin is. It's one of the Russian biggest ideologists. But, it was prior to start of the war, and people changed. And people changed because of war sometimes. So that's not a point of critics for me because, maybe 15 years ago, he could be pro-Russian and became pro-Ukrainian. That's normal for Ukraine. Many of actually good people who are now on front lines, maybe 15 years ago was pro-Russian. Before the invasion in Crimea, before the war started, before the death of their friends. So that's possible. People can change in that way. So I am not ready to criticize him for this rapid change of heart of 15 years ago. But for the rapid change of heart 2 years ago, when he was absolutely pro-Poroshenko and became absolutely pro-Zelensky, maybe I can.
Well, it's probably easier for you guys to comment this, because much more context, because for most of the listeners of his who are outside Ukraine, he just emerged from nowhere, in terms of these 3 months, and everybody knows him just those 3 months, not 4 months already, but yeah. That doesn't make a difference.
Theoretically, I can tell his background as an officer, but I don't think it's appropriate. Ukrainian, I'd say, Ukraine is a big country, but Ukrainian active part of society is not so big. We actually know more or less background of each other with our own flaws and advantages. I can tell some things about his previous military career and maybe find something to criticize. Yes, there are some things to criticize, but I don't want to, because that have actually no point now and here. Here and now, I want to discuss him only as a speaker of practical, unofficial, but still a speaker of Office of President in his role in our war as a speaker of Office of President.
All right, Victor. So, I imagine that for most of, people who are watching, not only, with sympathy, but like more from logical perspective, your comments will make some amendments to their view. So anyway, that is good. I hope we can expand on this topic someday later after the victory cigar. Some people who are watching, they might think that you are smoking one right now, but this is not a victory cigar. This is just a regular cigarette. Yeah, but we will smoke the cigar. So, Victor, as usual, thanks for your time. It's always a pleasure. I hope the victory parade is gonna be soon, and we all are prepared for that. Visiting Ukraine. So. Slava Ukraine, I have to say. What else?
Slava. Thank you.
Okay, so everybody who's watching, this was, another episode of Let's Talk Europe. And Europe, most, the hottest topic in Europe right now is obviously Ukraine. So we are going to give much more attention to this in the coming months. So see you in the next episode.